All right. Today we're going to be talking about the quick path or the happy path to implementing product recommendations on Commerce Cloud, and those product recommendations are powered by our Einstein infrastructure. We'll also be talking about a couple other features just very briefly, but this is typically where most people start out with our Einstein feature. Make all buying decisions based on current feature availability. That's over with. My name is Ross Guthrie. I am a senior product manager with the CSG group. I've been with the company for about 5 years, came over with the Demandware acquisition. So first, we'll lay a little bit of foundational knowledge, talk about just a very high level on what Commerce Cloud is based on, what developers will build with. Talk about the process to implement from a higher level, and then go on to some specifics about data enablement. Then we'll walk through the whole process in the context of the experiences of one of our clients, Black Diamond. And then we'll get into some details around coding, configuring, and some of the other tools that we have available for supporting the implementation. First, a brief introduction of what is Commerce Cloud Einstein. Einstein is a brand that gets thrown around a lot. There's a lot of different functions that it serves depending on the use case or the ultimate purpose or end result that a customer of ours might be trying to achieve. Back when we used to be Demandware, we purchased a company based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts called Quotient. They had a few customers like Dillard's, Men's Warehouse, and maybe a couple others, and they were just doing a lot of email personalization, a lot of on-site personalization, really custom data science work for them. And then, of course, Salesforce acquired Demandware, and then that Quotient technology became Einstein on Commerce Cloud. So first, a little bit about the basic architecture of Commerce Cloud. We have, down here, we have what we call our secondary instances, instance groups, which are sandboxes where developers will actually work. Then we have our primary instance group, or PIG, which is comprised of staging and production and development environments. And then there's usually some kind of code repository and build server that clients will manage themselves. So a lot of the development will happen here. There'll be some kind of central code repository that will get pushed to the build server, and then up to staging, which is sort of like the Bible for both data and code. That's where you want to keep everything production ready and basically untouched. And then all of that will get pushed from staging to production and development environments. And usually development environments are a little bit of a misnomer. They're used for like QA and UAT and things like that. And then we built on sort of separate from that was the Einstein engine built on AWS infrastructure, and then that integrates with our e-com platform through various sources of data. So we have daily product catalog data, so that's going to be product attribution, pricing, stock levels, and then we get daily orders, and we also want some order history as well. Up top, customers also have the option to develop their own feeds to deliver daily feeds from stores, or maybe a one-time feed from like a legacy system or something along those lines. And then automatically, when you deploy or launch on Commerce Cloud, you have clickstream data or activity tracking data. It goes by a lot of names. That is essentially browse behavior on the site. It can be anything from what searches the customer shopper is doing, what products they're viewing, what categories they're viewing, if they're adding to cart, deleting from cart. We'll get into a little bit more details of that later. And then from the Einstein engine, we get requests from the production environment based on the shopper, and then that sends real-time information back to the engine, and then we return things like product recommendations and personalized sorting orders on category pages and grid pages. A little bit more detail about activity tracking. There's a library for the JavaScript library. You can go check it out if you want to. And then we have some of the events over here. We're continually adding to this to kind of flesh out a broader picture of what the customer is doing. All of this is delivered asynchronously, so far it hasn't had any measurable impact on load time or anything along those lines. All right, so let's talk about the process of implementing. This is specifically product recommendations. So any good project starts with a strategy or a declared goal. What do we want the end result to be? What do we consider success? Once you have a good strategy, you can keep your efforts focused, and we have this saying on our team, don't walk past $5 because it's not $100. We want our clients to pick up that $5 bill as you go along until you get to that $100 bill. So don't let the perfection be the enemy of good and all those kind of platitudes. Next, you need to set up your data, which involves the feeds, and the activity tracking is all automatic, so there's nothing you need to do. Clients do have the option to turn off activity tracking, so sometimes there is a process to get that turned back on. Once we get one successful run of the order feed and the catalog feed, then you'll work. Our part in the matter is to deploy the engine. My team does a couple of checks in the data just to make sure we have the necessary parts there that deployment won't fail, and then we literally click a button and deploy the engine. Technically, you can be developing your templates throughout this process, but it's just a little bit easier when there's something for the engine return. So next step is development on a sandbox. And we have a reference application that provides a reference implementation of this, so there's available templates and examples there. So most clients can use exactly that. You do have the option to customize that if you want to. Next, we use our business manager tool, which is really just an admin panel. And it will allow you can target different customer groups. You can segment it if you want to, but really it just comes down to selecting your business logic and putting a schedule to it. Most clients just deliver it continuously. And at that point, you're ready to go live. All right, so let's get into the details of actually going through the process. So first, you'll set your region. We have 3 different locations or engine instances for Einstein. We have one in APAC, one in EU, and one in the Americas, which basically serves the whole Western Hemisphere. This is dependent on the customers you'll be serving, so you want to pick the location that's closest to your customers. Even if your site infrastructure is in US, but you're serving European customers, you want to pick the EU location. Next, you'll set up your catalog feed. There's just a few fields to configure: your host name, your image view type. That's really just where your image URL is housed. We use that for a couple other features, like previewing your recommendations and some other basket intelligence tool that we have called Commerce Insights. Whether or not you want to include out-of-stock products, whether or not your site is multi-locale currency. We lost signal. And then basically they'll just schedule the time that they want it to run. You want it to run in the middle of the night, not during peak hours, because this is coming out of production. So, and then also you want it to be after any of your jobs have completed into your production environment, so you're getting the most up-to-date data. There you go. The schedule, the time. And now we are on the order feed. So the order feed really just has these couple fields. Again, the time. We recommend doing both feeds daily. Also, at least after the previous day has completed, so you get all the orders, but ideally in not off-peak hours, so you're not impacting the customer experience. You can set your max orders per run. Sometimes clients have a ton of orders that they have built up, so you need to increase the max orders per run so that you get every historical order data point that has been accumulated since they launched on Demandware. And at that point, you're ready to go. Once you have one successful run, you can contact your customer success manager. They'll put a request in with my team, and we'll confirm deployment. If there's any issues, we'll work with the customer directly to resolve those issues, and then we'll give access to the configurator, which is a tool we'll look into a little bit later, and it provides merchants the ability to put some restrictions around what's returned in recommendations, and also choose different strategies. All right, so let's talk about the Black Diamond story. So where this fits in, they originally launched with recommendations on no search results pages, cart pages, and on the product detail page. They were actually able to use the same set of business logic for no results and the cart pages, so they're able to leverage that in 2 different locations. They did a proof of concept. We recommend anytime you change anything, that you test it against what your existing experience is. So they were working with a different vendor, paid third-party vendor that was delivering recommendations on their site for them. And so they did an A/B test against their previous provider against our product recommendations. They saw 100% confidence, an increase in conversion, and ultimately revenue. And it was included in their contract at no extra charge, so for them it was a no-brainer for them to go with us. In order to get it working, again, they just went through the feed setup. I think they said it took all of 15 minutes to get the original run going. They worked with our team to get the initial configuration set up, and then they were ready to go with their developer. At that time, they were able to use the out-of-the-box reference implementation. So all they really had to do was tag a couple different pages. So they just had one line of code they had to tag in the cart, the no results page, and the PDP. And at that point, they were ready to go live. This is a shot of our what we call a configurator. There's some general settings where you can configure how many product recommendations you want to return, whether or not you want to pick. We have these concepts of entity types, so a different data model of product, or whether or not you want to pin a couple products. There's not a whole lot to that slide. The strategy is where it gets a little more interesting. So you can pick what correlation you want to use. You can choose view-to-view behavior. Product affinity is based on the entire order behavior that we have. And then real-time personalization is based on that current session or in-session browse behavior. So it really responds to what the shopper's doing at that point in time. And then text similarity is just underlying basically all of our recommendations. It looks at the data that lives on the product and any kind of search activity happening around it, and kind of provides an underlying foundation, you could say, for the recommendations. There's also some other options, so you can do buy-to-buy behavior and view-to-buy. Typically, we find, though, that these first two perform the best in almost every case, namely because there's more view behavior than there is buy behavior. And we have the entire, usually 2 or 3 years of order history to base the product affinity off of. So in most cases, the more data there is, the better. And view behavior, really, it's a better indicator of what's about to happen, rather than looking at what's already happened and trying to predict what's about to happen. This is where you can get into specific rules. Black Diamond only configured these 3 rules, so all they did was exclude spare parts because there's not a huge revenue driver there. And then in a couple categories where they don't see a lot of doubling up of purchases, it made sense to demote that type of product and let complementary products float higher up into the recommendation area. This is the scheduling part. That recommender consists of the strategies and the rules. The content type is just recommendations because that's the area you're delivering it to. And then the template defines like the styling and how it renders on the site. Then they added a schedule, and then that was it. We have a Chrome plugin called the Commerce Cloud Integration Validator. And you can go to any Commerce Cloud site, look at this, and see what activities are being tracked on what page and what kind of information is being returned. For recommendations, you can also see if the engine is returning recommendations and your template's not rendering anything, then you know something's wrong with the template, and vice versa. If there's nothing being returned from the engine and your template is likely fine, so there might be an issue with the engine itself. So these are some best practices that Black Diamond recommended. On your PDP, your first 2 to 4 slots should be for like products, so they should be complementary products, and then they should be alternative products, and then allow complementary products to float up into the lower area of the product recommendations. On the cart and no results page, use personalized results. This, especially on the no results page, it reflects their current browse behavior and gets them back into that shopping experience very quickly. And then just as a general rule, and this is something that we recommend, test every change. If you're switching from a new vendor, test it. If you're adding a new rule, test it. Trying a new strategy, test it. It's like sort of that scientific approach. Change one variable, test it, and move on from there. And these are some of their lessons learned. They found that the initial technical documentation was challenging, but we took their feedback and have since improved that. Work with the Einstein team if you can to set the initial configuration. A lot of times we find that merchants will get a little bit too far down the road when they can just test against the baseline and kind of build from there. And these are some sort of their wish list, the next steps that they would like to see. Better reporting, which we'll be working on in the coming year. Predictive revenue projections, so if I change this strategy or add this rule, what might be the impact to the end result? Ability to adjust and test the algorithm. And depending on how you look at it, you can already do this. So you have those different strategies that you can choose that sort of put one correlation group in front of the other. But in terms of actually changing the algorithm itself, we don't have that ability currently. And then sticky products, which I mentioned earlier, we actually delivered based on their feedback. So now clients have the ability to, maybe you have a high stock of a certain product, you have a new product launch, so you need to have a lot of coverage on that, and that allows those products to be displayed across the entire site for that recommendation area. And then these are some lessons learned that my team and I have come across based on launching or deploying now something like 1,400 sites on our engine. Ensure the image view type is correct. This will make deployment fail, and we need it to power some other things like preview in the configurator and some other features that we have. We do support external image delivery, so a lot of our clients use Scene 7, which delivers images, product images from offsite. We just need an example of that URL, and we can rebuild it in the deployment process. This is a big one. We still see it come up. The anchor is not printed or is printed incorrectly. So we have this concept of an anchor. If you're on a product page, we want to recommend to the shopper based on what we're seeing, the activity that's happening around that product. So in order to do that, we need to know what that product is and recommend based on that. Same goes for the category. If we're recommending top sellers from within a category based on region and device, we need to know what category it is to do that. And it really comes down to this one attribute, that the context object attribute for products. And then there's also a context object attribute for category, which is a little bit cut off. But really all it does is gives us an ID and helps us base recommendations off the context of the shopper. And then there's an attribute in the template, and sometimes through customization, it gets either deleted or left out for some reason. And what this does is allows us to report and tie financial performance or business performance directly to recommendations so that we can log the view of the recommendation and ultimately stitch together the click, the add to cart, and the purchase so that we can report on it. And that's what that looks like. All it is this attribute in our IS tag. We have a ton of great resources on our internal community or our customer community exchange. We have a whole project timeline that links out to every resource you might need in every stage of the project. For new sites, there's some special considerations. We have a soup to nuts, like 40-page technical guide for developers that goes through this whole process in a ton of detail. And then QA, which really just expands on some of the lessons learned that we've shared here today and provides a little bit more detail around those. A couple other features we have. So once you deploy on the engine, that enables you to use, for the foreseeable future, all the features we're going to deploy on Commerce Cloud Einstein. The one we released late last year, I believe, was predictive sort, and this personalizes the ordering of products on product grid pages and search results pages, so that you're basically reflecting shopper behavior. And this just requires one small update to your cache tag on your search results pages and your category pages. And all it really does is invalidates the cache if it's a personalized sort experience. This is not for shopper experiences, this is purely for our merchants. This automated dictionary settings, it uses some natural language processing and the same engine deployment to recommend enhancements to our search dictionary settings or our customer search dictionary settings. So it takes what used to be maybe a week-long project and turns it into an accept or a reject that someone can do maybe for a couple hours, one day a week. And then coming up late in second quarter this year is Einstein search recommendations, and this is going to be personalized, basically search as you type. So if someone is typing S and they've shown a propensity for shirts, they're going to see shirts, or if someone is really shopping for shoes, they type S, it's going to autocomplete to shoes. And that'll be available Q2, probably late June this year. And that's it. I think I'm out of time, but I'll be hanging around if you guys have any questions. Be happy to have a discussion with you.